Great. So my name is Kyrie, and I work at Ministries, if you haven't met me. So I'm a church team coordinator, like Zach and Jenny. So I know quite a few of you just from working with you and doing different trainings and getting to know you and your families. But if you don't know me, that's who I am. It's like Kyrie it's like Marie with a K, not Kyrie Irving, like the basketball player. But I can now buy things with my name on it because he exists. So that's great. I like to tell my coworkers you can also call me Lord German Man because my first name means Lord and my last name means German Man. So whatever you feel like you want to say. You can flip to the next slide. So we're going to talk about some, we've got 50 minutes so we can cover a couple of resources. And I just want to focus in on like how do we specifically do that and put into play or put into effect what Pastor Eric was talking about. So I just want to start off first talking about reminding us from the foundation that we are all super messy. So this is actually my church. Let me grab this. This is my church, and we welcomed a Somali family last March, I think, 2 Marches ago. And you can see the mom and 3 of the kids. My favorite one is this one. If you can see her face. They just came into the office to get their green card applications in last week, and I hadn't seen them for maybe a month. And the mom says, "What's new?" And she goes, "Oh no, I know what's new. You gained weight." And then her husband goes, "Oh no, she didn't gain weight. She grew into a woman." And so I had some fun culture differences there and not being quite as Minnesotan polite. But I just thought that was funny. So this is our church, some people from our church, and we had like a big Thanksgiving meal last Thanksgiving. And I just like look at this picture, and I won't go into specifics, but like with what Pastor Eric was talking about, we all have poverty. Like through each one of these people, I've just seen and know, and myself included, the different like struggles, family relationships, and different struggles with sin, and different struggles that the world has put on them. And yet like just growing and seeking to glorify God, and there's so many gifts represented in this group of people. And like so much of the world has been changed by this small group of people. And so it's just amazing to see like so many people here today that are like seeking to glorify God and seeking to encourage others in glorifying God, because like, what was it, Jesus and 12 disciples and a lot of women that were with them that went out and just changed, absolutely the world is transformed. So I get a little overwhelmed. When I read When Helping Hurts, I ended the book and I was like, I can't do anything right. How do I help anybody? And so I think it can be overwhelming, and we don't want to be overwhelmed. We're all messy. And so as we seek God, we'll figure it out. I'm going to pass these out if everyone wants to just grab one. Pass it down. You can switch to the next. Oh, perfect. So I'm just going to repeat something that Eric quoted from When Helping Hurts. And so poverty alleviation is the ministry of reconciliation, moving people closer to glorifying God by living in right relationship with God, with self, with others, and with the rest of creation. Also listed in the book is a more specific alleviation of material poverty alleviation, which a lot of our refugee friends are in that place when they first come to the United States, or asylum seeker friends. And that's material poverty alleviation is working to reconcile the 4 foundational relationships so that people can fulfill their callings of glorifying God by working and supporting themselves and their families with the fruit of that work. So just keep that in mind. We'll come back to that as we go through our time together today. We're going to cover some resources. We're going to do kind of some case studies. So I'm going to make you talk to each other on transportation, housing, after-school programs, some medical stuff on Google, and then at the end, if you have any specific questions, let's talk through that too, because that can be really helpful for everybody to hear. So we're passing around some cards, so it will come to you. But this is just a little cheat sheet for as we go through each one of these situations, and as you go through different situations with your family, you can just keep these questions in your head. So the first one is ask your friend, if you had faced this challenge in your country, how would have you solved it? And so, let me read it specifically here. This can be in the form of literally asking your friend this question, or it could just be asking them, do you have an idea of how to solve this problem? So your friend comes with you to a problem. A lot of the times, I think we have the natural assumption of thinking, this is a problem they need to solve, they have no idea how to solve it. But just making sure to think they might already have a solution, or they even might have an idea of how they would solve it in their country that you can build off of to think of how to solve it here. Next, you ask yourself, okay, so they have a solution, or maybe they don't have a solution and you need to help them come up with one. Can they do it on their own? If yes, then absolutely hands off. Even if you think the outcome or the solution maybe isn't ideal, hands off. Let them do it on their own. Even if it's not a perfect outcome. If no, then what do they need to do this on their own? Get them connected to it. If they need a phone number, if they need we'll go through some different examples, but what do they need, and can you give it to them so they can do it on their own? And even if they can't do it on their own in either of those situations, let's say it's something that it's very difficult, then you can ask yourself, is this a situation that I need to do it with them? So not for them, but with them. We'll talk through some examples of that too, but to be honest, it's so much easier. When I was doing some case management with families, it's so much easier to just do something for them than to do it with them or teach them, because it takes more time. But it's so much more effective, and I have a story I'll tell later that really has encouraged me to continue in that. But keep this in mind as we go through the different kind of case studies today. So if you want to get into groups of maybe 5, just be thinking, I'm going to read through this problem, and I want you to split up into groups and just talk for just 2 minutes through those 3 questions. How can you respond to this situation? So a family your team has recently been connected with tells you they have just started a new job downtown Minneapolis doing housekeeping. They live off of University in Frogtown, St. Paul. They don't speak English very well, but can communicate a few things. They showed you a piece of paper saying when they start and told you through their friend that they don't know how to get there. Their job counselor showed them, but they don't remember. You know that this person in particular faced trauma that made remembering details difficult. How should you and your team, or just you and yourself, if you're a new neighbor, respond to this need? So 2 minutes. All right. Could I have just a couple people share some thought, just their one thing from their group? So what's one idea that they had in responding to this situation? Maybe group in the far back on the left? So to ask them what's helpful for you in remembering things? Okay, cool. Yeah, that's good. Maybe back on the far right? Especially with the time differences culturally. Yeah. I think, and just to say, I have a tendency to be afraid to say things you have to be 15 minutes early, for your first day on the job, or in general. I'm afraid to say things like that because I think I just get so excited about different cultures, and I don't want them to feel like I'm being paternalistic, or I don't want to be their friend. But what I've learned is that, I'm teaching them something. I'm not helping them out by not teaching them about American culture and letting them kind of on the in. I had a situation with this woman, the Somali family. We welcomed her husband, because he called me and he had changed his number and he didn't leave a voicemail. And so usually if I get a number from somebody or if I get a call from someone that doesn't leave a voicemail and I don't know their number, I don't call them back. And so I told him, I was I'm pretty sure most Americans, just so you know, they won't call you back unless you leave a voicemail. And he was like, that explains why people don't call me back when I call them. And so I felt so bad because I was, I'm sorry I didn't tell you this before, and he's, no, I want to know, he said. It's a little different because he speaks really well English. It's a little harder when someone doesn't speak as much. But yeah, for sure, praying with them beforehand, especially with people who have been through a lot of trauma, this can be really, really scary. Making sure you explain when you're looking at the bus routes, you need to, buses and trains are on different times, so where can we find one that is 15 minutes early? Even a lot of cultures, time is you start at this time means you start heading there, at that time. You start the event of going to work. And so everything that you guys said was great. I will say, and here in this space, it's super easy to have the right answer. It's not super easy, to have the right answer when you're actually with the family. And so this will be messy, and you'll make mistakes, and it will look very different. We have a family that I was teaching to ride the bus, and honestly, this is such a great place for relationship. Riding the bus with somebody, teaching them how to ride the bus, even if they don't speak English. There's a couple families I've taught to use the bus, and to my knowledge before that is this guy spoke no English, and on the way there, I got to hear his whole story, and he shared with me. I was honored to hear the story of what had happened to his siblings that had died, and just through actions, and you're sitting on the bus, so it's a little awkward, and you have to talk, and so this is great relationship time, but also things like thinking through, taking the time to talk to your friends if you're a new neighbor, or just pray through that with somebody, or if you're on a team, to talk to other people on the team of, how can we do this in a way that's empowering? Sometimes there's situations that are urgent. First day, he calls you, he gets lost on the bus, and can't find his way, and he needs to get to work, and he tried to take it on his own. It's okay, go pick him up, and if you're available to do that. But as much as you can from the beginning to set this foundation for providing them opportunities to do things on their own. So you guys got it good. Yeah, Donna.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So we are with a Iraqi family, a Muslim woman. She's a single mom here with her 5 kids, but we've been told that because she's Muslim, she will ride the bus by herself.
Oh. Yeah. I've not heard that with Muslim before.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it makes sense. I mean, honestly, I would be afraid. I can understand also why she might be afraid to ride the bus, being a Muslim woman. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah. Anyone have any ideas? Think through that resource? Yeah.
Well, sometimes Muslim women are, depending on the family, required
Yeah.
to have a male escort.
Yeah, that's right.
And if she didn't have a husband, or she had a son who was...
But he's in school.
Yeah. Yeah.
A question, did she say that?
Her brother said that.
Because maybe you could, I don't know, but maybe you could have a discussion with her and find out how she feels about that, and just say, well, in our culture, women do. I mean, help her to see that it's okay here. I don't know. It's worth a try.
Yeah.
She'll probably have to use the bus.
And in some of those situations, this is a solution that they have chosen that might not be the best outcome that we would foresee, but that's something that she's chosen. So, and you can provide maybe you need to go somewhere, I'll go with the bus, I'll go with you on the bus, or something like that. I think the tendency is it's easier to drive. And so even if she never takes the bus on her own and you're able to ride with her, just to show her how that she could do it on her own, and that or that it's not her riding, and she's not at the mercy of the things that you own and your skills. I think even if she never rides the bus on her own, that is helpful. If I can say that. I think the bus thing is a big piece. I know it seems simple, but even if you want to take your family to the zoo, so this comes up a lot. You want to take your family to the zoo, for example, or shopping or something, and they have too many kids to take with you in one car. And so teams are like, do we have to take 2 cars, or how does this work? If you can, I say take the bus, because you can take as many people on the bus or the train. The biggest problem with that is that we're busy, and taking the bus and the train takes a lot more time. But as you take the bus and the train, there's people that regularly take those things, and then you can connect them and talk to them. I know I used to take the bus 22 all the time, and I had how's your kids, Frank? We get to know each other on the bus, and so I think as much as you can do that with them, and that solves your transportation issue too, and makes them feel, I think, a little bit better. If you took public transportation and all your friends drove all the time, that feels kind of not great. And it makes you want to have a car. We can talk more about that, but I'm going to move on to say a couple more things if you want to flip. One more. Google Maps is another thing we didn't mention. Teaching them how to use Google Maps on their phone. They probably already know how to use Google Maps. But if they don't, teaching them how to use it is really helpful for taking the bus. You can just type in the address, select the bus, and it will show you how to get there. It's helpful for you if you don't know how to take public transportation, helpful for them. Another thing that people come into, you can hit the next one, is getting a doctor's appointments. Sometimes a family we'll talk about this more later, but sometimes a family might want you to come with them to a doctor's appointment, just because it's scary and they want someone with them, and that's great. But as they're, maybe going to frequent appointments on their own, all refugees that are newer refugees, or if they're on a PMAP with MNsure, they can call for a medical taxi. So this might be a little different you might not know if you're matched with a family that didn't come through as a new family, so you can ask them. But on the back of the insurance card, it has a number for transportation. And if you're interested, I have like a cheat sheet for families to go through. What I do with them is I write down, okay, transportation number. So you show them on the back of their card, okay, see, here's the transportation number, and you write it down on the paper. So next the paper says ID number. And so you look, okay, where can we find our ID number on the insurance card? Show them, and then write it down. Your address. Okay, what's your address? Write it down. And it's helpful for them, first of all, in just writing and going through like a type of worksheet like that to look for information, so that they have this cheat sheet, but also they know where to find that information on their insurance cards. Honestly, that was helpful for me when someone taught me how to use an insurance card when I was old enough to use my own insurance card. So I have those if anybody is interested, but that is a big need too for families and knowing how to get to the doctor. Yeah?
What does that mean? It's a medical taxi in the sense of what's different than a regular taxi? Is it
Yeah.
cheaper?
So their insurance covers it. So there's certain taxi companies that work with medical insurance. So it's just a taxi, but they work with the medical insurance too. Yeah, it's a good question. You can do the next. The other thing I just said about giving rides, I don't think it's not bad, obviously, to give rides all the time. I just think especially in the beginning of a relationship or a beginning of something happening, trying to set that foundation for equipping them in order to do something on their own. And we don't want to be like paternalistic about it, but they know that we have a car and we could give them a ride. But just honoring them in that in order to take care of that need on their own. But being aware that there might be some times that you do drive them to the doctor and go with them to the appointment or something like that. The next topic I wanted you to go through, split up into your groups and just take really kind of short, just come up with a couple of options. You're connected with a family of 5. It's during the end of their 12-month lease. You know this and are wondering what the family is planning on doing. How do you respond? Just like 1 minute, 60 seconds. Okay, I'm going to go backwards from the way I went last time. If this group at the front on the right wants to go first, just one thing. No idea?
If they're not confident with their English, they're not going to talk to them.
Yeah. Really hard to talk to the landlord, and they probably won't in a lot of situations. Good point.
So you can, I've tried, I said, you talk. No, you talk.
Yeah.
It's a tough one.
Yeah. Especially when you speak English, and in their head, a lot of the times it's easier if you talk to them. Yeah. What about this group here? Sorry, front group. Yeah, honestly, you're in these situations, and all of this goes out of your brain. I feel like, you get in them, and it's like, there's a need, and you feel it. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Also, share.
Good. Yeah, I think when I originally came up with this idea, I was like, my first assumption is thinking that the family has no plan after 12 months. Even when I'm coming up with a false hypothetical idea. And so I think that's something to note. Just first asking, do you have a plan? Were you thinking, if the families might think that they can just stay there, they might already have a plan to go somewhere else, or they might want to stay there but not know how, so asking those questions. And then I think it's big, your example that you gave of how you form that communication with the landlord and the family was really good. It's not bad for you to communicate with the landlord, I think, as long as you're doing that with the person. Because that can be really scary. I just think if I was in another country, I would want someone to go with me to talk to the landlord. Actually, I would probably just want that person to go to the landlord for me, right? If I'm trying to think, if I was in Kenya, please go to the person for me, or Somalia or somewhere. But I would feel really empowered and like I was part of the culture if they went with me. There's also something in all of these things. I like to always try to think, okay, if I was in that position, or if I was a friend of theirs, if we were just friends that we met, not through being connected through Arrive. However, we do have to keep in mind that there is this power difference of race and of economic standing and of them and all the trauma that they've been through and how they've been treated by people. And so that isn't a bad thing, that is nobody's fault, but just to keep in mind it's a little bit different than just your friends that you've met in other ways. And I have a tendency to think, just treat them exactly the way I would any friend. But we do have to at least keep some of these things in mind so that we're checking in with ourselves and with them to make sure that they have a voice, or that we're just inviting them into that. So I think all those things are super great. There's a lot of situations that landlords stink. Like I want to have so much grace for landlords, but I know a lot of the families, the places that they're staying, the landlords are not super great at fixing things or being culturally just aware of different things. And so I think another place that you can have with the family is talking through the landlords with those things. I have a team where the landlords actually, they are volunteers with the Ministries, so it's a unique situation, but they went with the family to talk with the landlords with an interpreter. I think also trying to find someone that maybe the family knows that speaks their language and a little bit of English, so that it's just not you and the landlord talking and the family sitting right there, because they have no idea, a lot of the times what you're seeing. So making sure they're really understanding as much as they can. It's really easy to just, I understand this, I'm just going to do it quick. Or like, I understand the lease is great, you can just sign it, you can trust me. Instead of sitting down and explaining it to them, I took a family to the bank. This is a different example. And banks are the most confusing and ridiculous things. I'm thinking, coming out of their culture, let's give your money to this bank, where then your money turns into not physical money anymore, it's this data. Same with leases, it can be really confusing of why we even have those things. And so just sitting down and explaining it to them can be really helpful, and is what should be done, I think. A lot of families, I'm sure, have talked to you about public housing, because word gets around within their communities and they want to apply for public housing. A lot of times after their first year, 6 months in, they start applying for that. If you're wanting to learn more, Housing Link is the website for a lot of the public housing stuff. And to be honest, I don't know all of the details about public housing. I know that it can be super, super helpful for a lot of people that are in situations that need that. And sometimes those are our families. I will say that talking to families about that it is possible for them to be able to save and buy a house. We have a family that's been here, I think, only 5 years that is buying a house. And so it's possible to do those things. And a lot of times when you're in a place where people are telling you, like, you can't do that, or like, you need this, or this is what you need, this is a lot of times what the world tells us, right? You need this, you need this, you need this. And so if your family goes down the public housing route, by all means, like, go with them and explain things to them and explain to them the background, but also explain to them that it is possible for them to save and buy a house and walk through those things. There's a fine line, as I was praying about this yesterday, I was thinking, man, the line is so fine between being empowering and being paternal, being like a parent. And so I think the biggest thing, if we were to like scratch this whole PowerPoint, I would just pray and talk to other believers and seek God's word for answers. But obviously we're going to talk some more specific examples, but pray through that and talk with them about that and just let them make their own decisions and explain what public housing is, explain what it would be like to look on Craigslist for a house and rent and build that renter's credit, and explain all those different situations, and do your own research too in looking up those things so you can explain it to them. But the biggest thing is just to teach them how to make their own decisions through that. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay. Another thing that I found to be super helpful, just so you guys are aware, is energy assistance, especially for families that are newer. A lot of the times case managers don't have time. It's not in the requirements to sign them up for energy assistance, but it's really helpful because we all know energy bills can be really expensive. So when they first start off, just getting them connected with that for a little bit as they're looking for a job and saving money and getting started off here in the US. You can just Google energy assistance St. Paul, and then there's an application, and if you can read, you can understand how to do it, if you can read English. So walking through that with them is really helpful. It's 10:55, and I want to leave room for questions, so I'm going to just, if you want to skip to the next slide, I was going to have us do a discussion, but after school programs, if I had to choose one big thing to make sure that your family is connected with, I'd say their school interpreter or social worker. The school may or may not, depending on where they are, have an interpreter for that language. If they're in St. Paul or Minneapolis, they probably do. But they have a lot of different school social workers and school liaisons, and they're so, so helpful. They probably are already connected to them, but for the parent to have a number to call for someone that speaks their language to ask questions about their kids, and even to know that they should call and ask questions, because that's a very American culture thing to do with school. Call and be involved in their schooling. But explaining that to them and explaining what those people can do to help and explain their schooling is really, really helpful for them. And then we've talked a little bit about this at our orientations, but just keeping an eye out on school meetings at that school and checking in. Hey, were you, our teacher conferences coming up? Explaining what teacher conferences are, offering me to go with them, because they probably don't understand what those are, but also that's super nervous to go into a school with a bunch of people that speak English, and a teacher that probably doesn't speak their language to go through that with the kids. I did put a couple links down if you want to hit it one more time. St. Paul, it's called Sprocket. It has like all their community education stuff on that website, and same for Minneapolis. Honestly, I just Googled and did a ton of research, so I was aware. But Sprocket and the Minneapolis like public school after school programs, there's tons of information on there. So even if you went to your family and said, "Oh, okay, so I'm getting to know the family, and I know that this daughter, she's 15 and she really likes this certain kind of music, or she really likes dancing, or, as you get to know people, you find out what they like, or she really likes math. I have a family that really like math. And there's probably an after-school program or some group to do that. Something to keep in mind as you walk through that with them is after-school programs are great, but there's some barriers to accessing those, one being language, but also transportation. So families might not know that there's a bus after school, or maybe there isn't a bus, and so just being aware that letting your families know that they can talk to their schools about it. And schools often have a lot of resources how to get people connected to those programs if they don't have normal access. This one I love talking about how teams can walk through medical situations with families. Mostly, I think, because it can be super scary. I'm so scared of going to the doctor sometimes, and I'm from here. I've been to a doctor's office in other countries, and that was even scarier. They come in, and the nurses were wearing dresses, and there were curtains, and I felt like I was in a movie, just because it's different. There was nothing wrong. It was just different. Something that I wasn't aware of until working at Arrive is that clinics usually have social workers that can connect with cases, especially that, families that don't speak English and maybe have problems remembering appointments or just understanding the system. And so, for example, at the Center of International Health, which is in St. Paul, if you're ever wondering, if your family's wondering some good clinics to go to that are culturally sensitive, please email us, because we work with them a lot. But they have a really great social worker that knows all the different programs to connect families to, and just keep an eye on them. Another thing is interpreters. I have gone with families to appointments, and the hospital does not get an interpreter because they think that I'm the interpreter, or that the family might not need one. Sometimes they're super good, sometimes not so great. So I think even just advocating for them and telling the family that you're working with, hey, you should get an interpreter. It's required for you to get an interpreter at a hospital, so ask for one, and making sure they know how to ask for one. Even if they speak pretty good English, medical language can be really confusing. Another thing to keep in mind as you're getting to know the family, if you are starting to talk about different trauma, things that they've gone through, or as you're growing deeper in relationship and they start talking through those things with you, make sure that they know that there's lots of resources for people who have gone through trauma. First of all, their primary care physician, but also the Center for Victims of Torture. And they're actually doing a couple tours coming up of like what the Center for Victims of Torture does. So Google them and look them up too if you're interested in that. But they do a lot of really, really great work through victims of trauma. Just a quick note on that is also just talking to them about our culture around counseling. Because a lot of cultures, people that go to counseling, including ours in a lot of spaces, are you're crazy if you go to counseling, or it's bad, or all these different things. But just lovingly as a friend, through an interpreter or through, if they're able to speak English, just explaining that that's good and healthy. Just like we were to go to the doctor if we sprained our wrist, we would go to counseling. And you can say that in pretty simple language. So there's lots of resources there. Another thing that, if you ever have a family that is a new mom, please also contact us, because we could do a referral for them to get a nurse's new mom's visit. Refugee families, since they're new immigrants, are eligible for this, where a nurse will come the first couple weeks and months just to check in with the mom, see how she's doing, make sure she understands how like the Minnesota healthcare works, the system, and what moms usually do. Like, they go to this many month visit and all those different things. So if you're not aware of that, and if you have a family that has a new baby or they're pregnant, please let me know. I just wanted to share an example, you can go through all of them, of just a team that did this really well, and how I've just seen this amazing transformation in this woman's life. We had a family come, and two sisters and their kids. And one of the sisters, basically from birth, had a leg that didn't work very well and didn't finish growing. And as we got to know the family, what we had kind of found out is she had 5 kids. And in U.S., if you have 5 kids, mom is crazy and busy and does all these different things. But a lot of times in the places where they're at, it's much more, community raising kids. And so she had a lot more help and people living next door to work with the kids. And so when she came here, she told me she was super nervous because now it was all on her. She didn't have a husband. Her sister was here, but her sister had her own kids. And she said, I can't even hold when she first came, she couldn't even hold her son really. And as the team and I got to know the family, it was pretty clear that a lot of the family members just did things for her, which I'm sure, growing up with a sister that had a lot of hard times doing things, you have to do things for her and figure out those things. And so when she first came, we brought her to the doctor and immediately set her up with some different doctors and appointments. And the first couple of appointments, the team actually went with her to those appointments. So when she first came, she was here, came on a wheelchair, and then was able to get around a little bit on crutches, but pretty much for the most part. It was hard to go to English class because there was no bus, because she only lived about 3 blocks away. But that's hard. It's a long ways to walk in crutches. So they walked with her. They went with her to the appointment. The building is super confusing, so they showed her how, wrote down which floor, and then with an interpreter set up the next 5 appointments. And then when they got home, they brought that cheat sheet for calling a medical taxi and just had her call the medical taxi. And a couple times, they didn't understand, and so they took the phone and said, oh, this, and this, and then handed it back to her to finish the conversation. And then she missed a bunch of appointments at first. She forgot about them or didn't know how. And so the team went back and said, okay, what can we do to make it easier for you to remember? Because we really want you to work through this. And just from a team mindset, from the get-go, that can be really frustrating. Come on, we've spent all this work setting up appointments and you missed them? But she was coming from she was coming from a totally different place of, focusing on other people, not herself. So they showed her how to take a medical taxi, continue to follow up. So anyways, it's been a year now of just continually going back and checking in with her. How are you doing? What do you need? What are your dreams? Are these appointments helpful? Would you like a different doctor? Those types of questions. And she speaks very little English, and still was able to communicate these things. And we just had a picnic this last August, and she showed up, and I hadn't seen her for a while because I wasn't her case manager after 3 months. So I'd only heard things from the team, and she showed up and she had just a cane, and then she flew the cane up in the air and was like, Kyrie! And another thing too is when she first came, she couldn't write the date, and she just, write X for her name and couldn't write the date. And so the next couple times as I was, having her sign things, I made her write the date, and it took 10 minutes for her to write the date, which was a big inconvenience on my part. I just wanted to go home. But to be totally honest with you, you get in those situations and you're like, I've already been here for 2 hours. This would be so much easier if I just wrote the date. But then a couple months later, when I closed the case, she was, Kyrie! And signed the date really fast and her name on her own. And it was just so clear from her that she was so excited and so proud of that. And so it's so worth all of the time. I know you guys know this, but I always need a reminder that it's so worth taking that 10 extra minutes, because it takes a year or more until you see sometimes a lot of the growth and how loved they felt and how that relationship has grown. But it's worth that time. Those are just a couple things about medical. And just as a kind of a funny thing, but Google yourself and teach them how to Google. Half of case managers' jobs, sometimes we know a lot of things and we know lots of people that are experts, but I feel like half of our job is Googling things too sometimes. So Google yourself and teach them how to Google, and just as a quick note, teaching them how to, you can flip it one more time, know if something is a scam or not. This is a bigger topic, but just talking through those things with them. This is how you can trust a website. This is how you can't. That's a little deeper, maybe for someone that's a little bit more technological savvy. But I just wanted to take some time for questions. Yeah, that's a good question. So if anyone didn't hear, the question was on medical insurance. So when refugees first come, we set them up with medical assistance, emergency medical assistance right away. And then that turns into they get registered with MNsure under a PMAP, so with Blue Cross Blue Shield or UCare, or there's a couple different ones. And then that goes by income. So that's just like anyone that would sign up for MNsure, it goes by income. And I don't know as much about Medicaid, and I know just enough to be dangerous about MNsure, to be totally honest with you. But she should be eligible, I can imagine, unless she's applied and something has changed. Because anyone is eligible depending on their income and depending on kind of the situation they're at as far as open enrollment and their jobs. So good place to go. Yeah.
Free clinics and
Yeah.
are low-cost clinics in the suburbs, or they only in the city?
I don't know about Hopkins, but I know mostly about St. Paul, Minneapolis. But there's a quick. Let me write this down. I'm just writing this down so I can remember it. There's a quick. There's a website that I'm now forgetting the name of with the different free clinics in Twin Cities. And after this session, if you give me 10 seconds to Google it, I'll remember what it is, what it's called. See, I told you, my job, Googling things. There's a website with all of Minnesota's free clinics. It's like a Minnesota government website, so I'll look that up. Yeah, free clinics are a really great resource, especially MNsure doesn't usually cover very good dental care for adults. So University of Minnesota, I'm a gopher, but the University of Minnesota is a time-consuming thing, but they have really pretty good low-cost dental care. There's some free clinics as well, so you just you gotta find those. But I can send you, we have access to a lot of those lists too, so please, there's some access on our volunteer resources page for those things. There's, we have different, topics that you can look up where we've got lots of resources, but also you can reach out to us. So I can send that to anybody that needs that. Any other questions? Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's very rare that that much, kind of what you're thinking. I can think of one family, especially families that come that they don't know anybody else here. You know, most families, they know people here, they have a community, but some families come and they don't know anybody at all, and there's not a lot of people in their people group. And I'd say the first thing is that even if someone feels like they don't have any skills or resources, they probably do. It's just probably really hard to hear. There comes a case, and it says this in When Helping Hurts, that you don't want to be so afraid to help somebody that you don't do anything. Like, it's better to do something. So I just want to encourage you, like, if you're thinking today, like, oh, I did this wrong or something like that, any help is good. And I'm thankful that we serve a God that as we're seeking Him and seeking each other, He's faithful to also teach us in that and, like, be graceful with them in their lives. But in those situations, I'm trying to think of a good example. I think, especially if it's a situation where it's an emergency that someone's going to, so for example, if something's an emergency, this is an easy one, and you need to call 911, that is not a moment to teach the family to call 911. That's you can call 911. Or, I'm trying to think of another example. Or if the family's in a place, so there's a situation where one of the members had to go to the hospital, and they were working through some stuff with the case management that needed to be done, but it was really overwhelming, obviously, because their daughter was in the hospital, and they had just moved here a week ago, and this specific family had been through, every family has gone through trauma, but this one was really struggling to function in some daily functions from that trauma, and so the team did things with them while they were with them, but probably did a lot more than maybe you would do with another family that could do it, this woman who could write the date on her own. If we were writing the date and she needed to get to her job, there might be a situation where, okay, she needs to get to her job right now, and I could take this moment to teach her how to write the date, but she probably needs to get to her job, so I'll do that later with her. So there's situations, that's why I think there's absolutely no way we can say one thing to any of these situations. So I think the biggest thing is prayer, and then talking with other people, and then we can gain wisdom. So I don't know if that kind of rambled a little bit. Did that answer that question? Yeah, I think. Yeah, over here. Yeah. No, that's a really good point. Was everyone able to hear that? Yeah. I think that's great. I think, too, one last thing I was going to say is, and again, I'm sure all of you know this, because I know this, and then I don't act it out sometimes. So it's just good to have a reminder that what you think the family needs might not be what the family thinks that they need. So, for example, we were talking with someone this week, and this team put together all this furniture for the family. They were so sad the family didn't have any furniture, they didn't have a table, and then they came to visit the family, and they had given them this table, and the table was sitting in the corner because they don't use tables, they sit on the ground. And so that's just a simple example, but even if, let's say, there might be a situation that your family can't pay rent one month, and because of a decision that they made, and depending on the situation, you might have to just let them not pay rent and kind of face those consequences. That's where I say there's this fine line between, we don't want to be like a parent because these are adults. But at the same time, if the family is learning, especially with families that have a hard time learning budgeting and stuff like that, but they might need to go through that to understand just how things work here with life in the U.S. So this is all dependent on very situational situations. We might have somebody, let's say it's a new mom that's pregnant and she wasn't able to work because she had that baby that month, and so they couldn't pay rent that month. That's a little bit different of a situation than a family that maybe has spent 17 years in a camp, and so they're having problems learning that money can last longer than just the day that you get it, and so they might buy a computer with it because they had money that day, which isn't because they're irresponsible or lazy, but probably because as they're walking through, they haven't had a chance to have that kind of money before. That might be a situation that we'd say, well, you probably don't need to help them out with rent that month. And see if they have a solution they can find on their own. And usually families do. The one thing, and then we'll end here, is that we don't want to take the dependency off of ourselves from the family and then have them be dependent on maybe people in their community or different governmental assistance things. That's why I talked a little bit about that public housing stuff. As far as what refugees are eligible for, actually Minnesota's public assistance programs are pretty good in comparison to some of the other assistance programs throughout the country, and not creating a setting that they can stay on that forever. We can talk more about that later if anyone has questions. But we don't want to pass that off just from ourselves. We don't want to just do the development. We want to do the transformation. So as you're getting to know them, and even families, a lot of families in these cultures, it's not like you're the way when you're talking to a fellow U.S. person. You can say things like, I base a lot of my decisions off based on what I find in Scripture, and this is what I learned about debt from Scripture, and this is what I learned about, yada yada about Scripture. Obviously, prayerfully do that with your families, but a lot of families are a lot more open to hearing things like that and want to hear about those pieces of you, of how you make those decisions. And honestly, that's been helpful for me because I don't make a lot of my decisions based off what I read in Scripture, and I probably should. In those life decisions, it's easy to segment it from this is what is wise and this is what the Bible says. But that provides a really cool opportunity to share the gospel and just talk about what Jesus says about those things. So it's 11:16, so I should let you go. But I'll be here for questions if you guys have any. Thank you.